Welcome back to another episode of STEM and Stilettos. This is your host, Zofia Morales, and today we are going to talk with Kady Romagnuolo. Uh, and we're going to look at questions like, what do you do when you feel like you just can't raise the funding that you need to get your business off the ground the way you want to get it off the ground? So before we swing into that, I'd like to invite you to get to know your own self a little bit better. um, I created a leadership pitfall quiz. And if you take 60 seconds to go through that quiz, it will give you insights into what your leadership strengths and shortcomings might be, as well as perhaps even some insight into your own progression uh, in your leadership journey. Because oftentimes we start as one sort of leader and discover that we need to modify a few things. So if you go to leadershippitfallquiz.com and give it 60 seconds, you can get some insight into where you're at and maybe some of the things you might want to tweak or shore up a little bit to improve your leadership effectiveness. So, with that out of the way, we will introduce Kady. Kady is a founder and broker of record at Blue Moon Realty Inc. She's actually the founder. I said that in a way that make you think that maybe there's someone else. There is not. It's her. It's a boutique real estate brokerage making waves in the industry with innovative marketing strategies rooted in the psychology of sales. With 16 years' experience as a top performing broker in one of North America's most competitive markets, Kady is also a passionate advocate for mental health support for real estate professionals and a spiritual business coach, helping entrepreneurs get aligned, break through their limits, and realize more profits. Kady is a multiple best-selling award-winning author and international speaker on the world tour for Think and Grow Rich and has pitched on the hit show The Dragon's Den. As a certified neurolinguistic programming master practitioner and the founder of Moon Logic, her unique entrepreneurial approach blends brain science with the power of moon phases to create transformational sales results that feel like magic. Welcome, Kady. I'm so happy to have you on the show.
Thank you so much for having me here.
Um, I think we should probably lean into the elephant in the room because I just introduced you. There's all this NLP, there's realty stuff. How is this related to tech?
Yeah. Well, the my real estate business is very different from what has traditionally been out there. We are a primarily online business and we dive deep into tech. So everything that we do is all about online resources, connecting dots in ways that isn't usually done, and still really building relationships through values-based technology.
Awesome sauce. Now, if you've been in the online space at all, you'll know that tech stacks are really freaking expensive. Was this one of the reasons that you had to seek partnership as you were getting your company started?
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of resources we needed to get up and running. A lot of people think that when you don't have a brick and mortar shop or business, that you eliminate the costs of having that expensive space. But instead, right, all of your resources go into the virtual world, the invisibleness of everything. So there was a lot of pieces not only did I need funding for, but also knowledge based with as well.
Yes, yes. You need some technical professionals back here who know what they're doing because you do not want amateurs doing this
Right.
when you're trying to create a seamless and a what I want to say, a client supportive experience.
Exactly.
So, as you were getting your brokerage up and running, this electronic virtual e-brokerage, what was the most significant challenge that you faced as you were going through this process?
Well, for me, I had this big vision, which I'm sure anyone founding a company does. And I could see it all in terms of the course, the path that I would want our clients and customers and agents to go through. But it was very difficult to get it tangibly set up. So, if you've ever had a really big idea and it's like, I wish my brain could just plug into somebody to do the how for me, that's where the roadblocks were. So, it was a huge amount of trying to not only figure out what questions I needed to actually ask to get to the outcome I wanted, but who was going to be the person to answer those questions.
Yeah, because a lot of times when you have a big vision, it takes more than just the resources that you have on board between your two ears and that you can put out through your own two hands.
Mhm.
And yeah, that complicates matters a little bit.
Yeah, and
Um,
one of the big
yeah.
reasons I wanted to create a real estate brokerage was to do things differently. So when you think out of the box and you want to have an out of the box business, it's not a buy it by the box and get it up and running startup.
Well, this is true, and it's also very hard to get that started under the purview of someone else. In other words, someone who's got something traditional established. A lot of times they're not willing to change what needs to be changed because they're afraid of breaking stuff.
Yes.
Absolutely. So tell us a little bit about how you went through this startup process. When did you get the idea for your digital brokerage, if we'd like to call it that? Is that an accurate
Yeah.
description?
Yeah, I think that would be accurate. So I think there's a natural progression that happens. You talked about it in leadership, right? Moving through the sequence of becoming something different than what you started out as. And that's definitely happened for me. I would say I originally wanted to open this brokerage way back at, even 5 years old. I like to joke sometimes that I had that placed in my heart. But I didn't know what it would truly be. And it wasn't until there started to be big shifts in how I did my own personal business as a real estate broker before being the person behind the scenes. There were a lot of shifts happening in the industry that people were showing up less and less to the office. So it was about having the vision and how I wanted to serve people, but also trying to future pace what challenges were going to be coming down the pipeline in the industry. So about 3 years ago, I really had it in my heart quite deep that now is the timing and it's got to be online.
Interesting. Now, what did you see coming? I guess, what were those shifts that you saw coming? What was the future pacing in the world according to Kady?
Yeah, it's a great question and probably one that we all wish we had a crystal ball for. Like, what is the future
Right.
pacing of an industry, right? Oh my goodness. Well, from my perspective, what was happening, and I'm very connected and involved into what we call organized real estate, so our association levels, our board levels. And what has been happening is this divide of people really wanting to have space in their lives for their own lives, right?
Oh
As
my
a
gosh, what a mind. What?
Can you believe it? Yeah.
Oh,
It has been mind-blowing. It's funny because we joke about it as such common sense, but it hasn't been common sense for the entrepreneur to
oh
have
no.
balance,
No,
right?
balance is like one of these future things that you hope you achieve down the road after this huge, incredible push of putting your thing together and giving it life
Yeah,
is what I want to say. Not over, but established, right? It's like when your
exactly.
kids go off to school or leave the house. It's that sort of a goal.
Exactly. And as we saw the changes happening in the world to work at home with a lot of different sectors, what happened was people started to realize that they get a lot of time back in not having to drive to certain places and also the comfort zone that you have sometimes in just having your own personal space to work in. This is
Yes.
where, right? I think that NLP side of me, the neuro linguistic programming coach, that knows that we all operate so very differently. We process differently from our mindset, and that requires us to also have different spaces to feel comfortable in. So,
Yes.
a big forecasting thing that I saw coming a couple of years ago was the fact that although real estate agents are working with different people continually, and we're doing paperwork, we're doing desk work some of the time, we are more so in people's homes. Right. And
Yes.
nobody talks about the fact that none of the actual business, if you are selling, if you're a top producing agent, none of that is happening in
In the
an office.
office.
Right.
Exactly.
And it like goes way over our heads that if you're really a producing agent who's doing well, chances are you're not in the office very often.
Yeah, they aren't going to see you around the office. They might see your assistant around the office, but they're not going to see you.
Right. And so the challenge then becomes, how do I have the tools and resources that I need as somebody operating at a certain capacity, not in a physical space?
Mm. And how did you start to answer that question?
I did this beautiful thing that I call mapping across. And it's where you take a unique ability or a skill set or an experience that you have in a particular area of life and you map it across to another area where it wouldn't typically be found to the untrained eye.
Mm.
And
Give
yeah,
us
and
an
so
example of that.
so this is where passion melds with all of the logic. And
Okay.
as a spiritual business coach, I had this natural knack for just being able to pull apart someone's business from the outside and really look at the details that they weren't seeing.
Mm.
And none of that work was ever done in an office. And most of that work was done with an online, I want to call it a safe space, right?
Okay.
Much of what you're doing now is creating space, safe space for people to learn and to grow and have conversations, right?
Exactly.
And so it's like that in the coaching world where I got really good at understanding what did somebody need in order to grow, in order to figure out how to do more sales. And I had created an online portal that was what I called a magic school, where you could
Oh,
learn and have all the tools and the
nice.
resources as an entrepreneur that you might need. It gave just everything that you could think of. And so when I started the real estate brokerage, I literally said, I don't need to break the mold on what I'm currently doing and do it in some other different way. I just need to map it from here, where I'm doing it in a different industry, into where it's never been done before.
All right.
So I
Which
duplicated
sounds really simple
in theory.
on its face, in theory. But I imagine there's a fair number of moving parts there.
Yes.
Yeah,
And I'm still discovering moving parts that tweak often.
indeed. So, at what point in your thinking and planning and plotting process did you go, you know what, I need an investor or two?
Mhm. And the dreamer in me, oddly enough, initially thought I wouldn't. I thought I would be able to continue to move my own capital as I was, let's call it hustling as a real estate agent as well. But I started to realize very early on that in order to operate from that leadership position, from that founder position, I had to take a big step back from the sales role, from being the
Yeah.
operator inside the company to outside of the company and seeing what my baby needed as a resource, right, to grow.
Mm. Was there like a defining moment when this kind of smacked you between the eyes?
Yeah, honestly, it was when I realized that the whole premise for why I started this, having balance, having a safe space, I was coming against serious resistance to my own advice. Right. So I
Ah,
was finding myself pushing against that. I know it to be true that you can live in that form and instead really just burning out, essentially trying to do it all.
yeah, in that kind of forcing paradigm, it's like I'm just going to work harder and eventually I'll get over that hump, right?
Yeah. It got worse instead of
It,
better.
it does, as it tends to do.
Yeah.
So, once you had that realization, what were some of the steps you went through to get ready to make that ask to a person who has money?
hmm I had honestly some conversations with people that had no idea what I really wanted. And it was so I could get some advice on how was I sounding if I was going to give a pitch to
Mm-hmm.
somebody outside of my company, to somebody who wasn't a family member or that believes in me very deeply. How was I going to sound? Was it going to make sense? And
Mm.
after doing that, I started to realize there were some holes in how I might be perceived for somebody strictly looking to invest.
Oh, okay. And how did you choose these people?
Honestly, it was very intuitively driven. I would start up a conversation with somebody that I just felt drawn to on the street or in a coffee shop sometimes. A lot of times it was social media based, somebody that might have followed me and, understood me from a different perspective. Well, what do you think if I did this instead? And just people I was really drawn to.
Excellent. Excellent. And you mentioned you stayed away from people who were likely to go, "Oh, you're the best. We know you're the best. It's perfect."
Yeah. Because as much as it's great to have that support, when you really need feedback, people got to give it to you straight.
Yeah. And strangers will do that because they got no dog in the fight.
Exactly.
Absolutely. So once you got your pitch kind of to a place where you felt like, okay, you've plugged the major holes, how did you go about finding the right people to now give that pitch to for real?
Yeah, I had to get really creative because there wasn't a mainstream resource available to me. And I first started by asking a bunch of people, right? Like, what have you done or what have you researched or what didn't work out for you? Because I was a big believer in there was something missing that I just hadn't connected with. And if it wasn't right for one person, it might have been right for me. And so I eventually found somebody that mentioned a particular program that was really buried deep within some organization that I probably likely wouldn't have been turned on to at any other point had I not heard about it through the grapevine.
Wow.
And initially, when approaching them, the very first thing that I was told is we do not lend money to that type of business.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yes. And that's one of the initial screening hurdles you have to get over when you're looking for money is finding investors who are interested in the area you're in.
Yeah.
How did you overcome that?
Well, I used more mapping across where I put my coach hat on and I treated the person on the other end like somebody that needed to have a shift in their mindset
Mhm.
because it was
Now,
all about their perspective.
now, how do you know you're making the mind shift on the right person, or is this going to be a series of mind shifts?
Yeah, it's the gatekeeper, right? You got to
Yeah.
find the gatekeeper. And that was a really good point to asking questions about at what point in the process do I speak to somebody, right? That has the ability to say yes.
Mm,
And you get to the right person.
yeah. And sometimes it takes a little bit of asking. How much asking did it take to get to that right person?
A good couple of weeks.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very good. So persistence is important here. And
Yes,
one thing I will notice is you did not take the initial no.
that's right.
And I think that's an important thing as women to kind of internalize is that no, outside of the Me Too movement, does not always mean no.
Yes, right. Very good distinction.
there, there are places in the world, and business is one of these places where persistence and asking different people in different ways and asking why after they say no um, is are really important skills to have in order to achieve that success.
Such a good point.
We are up against our first break already. Can you believe it? So, what I'd like to do is invite everyone who's joined us here today, get out your pen, get out your piece of paper, and spend a little time around some of these topics that we have just walked through. If you have an idea that's kind of been percolating, spend a little time with that idea and start maybe giving it a little more air. Give it an opportunity to grow a little bit. If you already have an idea that's in the works and it's starving for capital, let's spend a little time around, well, who could you talk to perfect your pitch? Or if you perfected your pitch, where can you find places to go pitch it? Spend a little time just thinking on these things. Give it a little bandwidth over the break, and we'll be right back. Thanks for hanging in with us through the break. This is Zofia Morales. I'm still here with the amazing and wonderful Kady Romagnuolo. So I really appreciate y'all coming back after the break. And we are about to swing into some details. I love me some good details. So you spent some time talking to people about possible sources of funding, places maybe where they flunked out getting funding. Where do you find people who've done that?
You'd be surprised how many people are constantly looking for resources and options. Now, I mean, I hang around a group of entrepreneurs. Essentially, I tend to attract entrepreneurs that I'm friends with. So it's just, it,
That
it tends
helps.
to be in my,
Yes.
yeah, it tends to be my vibe. Now, I mean, there's varying degrees of entrepreneurs, right? There's passion hobby entrepreneurs too. It doesn't
Right.
mean that everybody has a global empire.
Exactly. There
And
are solopreneurs, there are people with
yes,
tiny teams, there are people who've bootstrapped all the way along. But you're
yes.
looking for somebody with what I want to say, a grander vision.
Yeah. And so I ended up having a conversation with my husband when I was coming against not finding exactly what I was looking for. We don't do this with this type of people. And he had said, you got to lean into what your strengths are. And I thought, like, duh. Of course,
I
what I've
thought
been
I
doing, right?
was.
Yeah. And what he actually meant, and this is the interesting thing again about the brains and processing and just perspective, is you need to look at how other people perceive you and what is the strength that they are going to perceive you having. Why
Oh.
would they want to give you money? And why would that organization care about giving someone like you money? And that's what really actually shifted things for me because,
So let's talk about that. What did you
okay.
think your strengths were before that thought
Well,
arrived?
I mean, I was thinking like the logical things that, I've got really good work ethic. I'm somebody that has a track record as a top producer. I was doing the dollars and cents to it where, this is what I produce as an individual. This is what the forecasting is going to be. And treating it more like you would, I guess, a bank loan or what I was used to in helping clients with financing in the real estate
Mhm.
world. And that was just what I knew to be true.
Okay.
And
And what
yeah.
did you discover after this thought arrived and kind of shook up your world?
Yeah, it was actually way more simple than I could have even comprehended. And it was that I was actually one of the youngest to open this type of business. So
Oh,
in my industry, it's fairly normal for someone to maybe work as a top producer for a certain number of years and then, move up an evolution of, okay, I want to have a team and then maybe I want to open my own actual brokerage.
yeah.
But what usually happens is that is much later on in life because real estate tends to be a career that is a second or third career for a lot of people.
Okay, sure. Yeah. I can
Yeah.
see that. And a lot of the realtors that I have known and worked with, that was in fact the case. They were late in their 40s when they decided, you know what, I'm doing something totally different. Real estate is it.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
So, me with 16 years behind me and most of my career at a certain top percentage in the industry in my 30s was different.
Yeah. Very much so. How did you leverage that to get past these gatekeepers who are like, well, we don't do like real estate brokerage stuff?
Yeah, so I actually found a particular person that was really in awe of the passion I had for doing things different. And they then directed me on to another person that was really interested in giving funding to a certain age bracket.
Oh,
Yes. So it was the combination of my passion that excited the other person to be able to connect me. And then also that there was a perfect program for the type of individual I was as a person, not as a business.
yes. And I think that's a much bigger deal than a lot of us realize when we're going out and looking for investor money,
Mhm.
VCs, angels. A lot of them have what I want to say, larger goals, larger missions they're trying to fulfill with the investment that they're doing, especially when you're talking about a VC and angel, more of the angel or like family office kind of thing.
Right.
And so when you're doing your due diligence, you want to pay some attention to who you are. There are specific groups out there that want to lend to women, that want to lend to young people, that want to lend to certain ethnicities. And so it's really kind of important to pay attention to where you fit in those buckets.
Hmm. Yeah, I couldn't agree more, especially because it really connects into values as well. Usually there's a meaning behind. And so I like asking the question, well, why do you want to be involved in a business like this with this type of person? And that will give you the gut check too, right?
Yeah.
Or the tingles that you get when it's like, oh, yes, this feels good for everybody.
Yeah. And I think in some ways, as much as like our egos would like to get money from the top VC firm and whatever, right? Um, a lot of times you'll have a much more balanced and supportive experience with people who are more mission based and less
Mhm.
monetary return based.
Right.
Not that
Yeah.
they are going to forego the return. Don't think that's
True.
the case.
Yes, it is the backbone.
Yes, absolutely. This is something that has to happen, but they tend to pay more attention to the people and the processes and the things involved than just like that bottom line, which makes for
Mhm.
a much better experience in my humble experience.
Yeah.
So, what are some of the unique challenges that female founders face as opposed to just the general business founder?
I think, well, females come from this place of nurture. It's this just resonance that we sort of naturally have. And what tends to happen is nurturing is a very double edged sword. It creates this beautiful experience of caring about others, creating products and services that are really good for the world. And then we tend to shift into, I don't know how to ask for everything I need because I'm too busy doing it for everybody else.
Yeah, I've been there, done that.
Hmm. So I have found that just the aspect of actually caring so deeply to create something sometimes puts the things that I could get help with on the back burner because I want to do them myself. I
Yeah,
want to put myself in that role to help others.
yeah. Have you noticed? I know this is more of a pitfall for some people than others. When you're in that role of founder and you have a team, you've got employees, you've got all of that happening under there. Occasionally, you'll get someone who's not quite the right fit.
Hmm.
Um, have you found that that kind of nurturing tendency interferes with doing what is best for both the business and the person? And I will
Oh,
remind you, it's the best for both because if they're not fitting, it's not good for them either.
yeah, I couldn't agree more with this, and I think I've had a lot of past experience in being stuck in the I don't know how to let go, even though it's best for both, because I
Yeah.
don't know how to speak up until a couple of years ago, where really it was just one of those moments of this is not serving anybody, and I need to learn how to speak up.
Yeah.
And so at this point, I would say I brought into my business the ability to really have some good questions before doing that hiring process. And
Mm,
we've been really fortunate. We're 2 years in business now, where I've had some instances where I have most definitely said to people, "You are not a right fit for us," and had the upfront conversation rather than taking them on and needing to have that parting way conversation later.
yeah. It's easier that way than the other. Um, Fill me in a little bit on what some of these early screening questions are that are important for you to get the right fit. I know for myself, one of the things that I do as part of my it's not even the interview process. It's way before that. It's in the application. There are tests built into the application.
Yeah.
And if you fail those tests, you don't even get to the interview stage. So
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about how you seek out that right fit.
Well, one of the first things is I am always coming from the perspective of speaking to the person I want to draw in. So immediately, I do a lot of online presence. There's just obviously as a more of an online tech company, and I find that by first presenting what it is that I'm operating by. In that sense, most of the time that immediately disregards people who want to not be involved with that. So, for example, video. Video is
Hmm.
something that I'm hugely passionate about, works really well in real estate, but
Yes.
somebody may not be comfortable doing that. And if they're not comfortable doing that, they're probably not a really good fit for the culture that we have because we love to throw ourselves on video. And it's a
Right.
very much a
And
team
it's an
effort.
important part of the marketing process for
Yeah,
your
right.
style. Yes.
Yeah, and just being comfortable around other people, creating that safe space to allow people to feel like they can jump on video is a big passion of mine too, but you got to develop that trust. So, how I gauge whether or not someone is open to growing or building that trust bond with me is something very simple. And everyone who's listening, who maybe has an opportunity to do with this with me, is now going to be like, oh, I know exactly what she's doing if this happens.
That's
And
not entirely a bad thing.
yeah, right. And I'm going to encourage you to lean in and say yes if this ever happens to you with somebody else, because all it is instead of, so it's responding and communicating. I get an
Mm.
email request, a text, or a voicemail, somebody requesting to talk to me about potentially joining the brokerage. Then I will do voice notes. So
Aha.
send them a voice note, and that could be through whatever platform that they use if I don't have a direct phone number, or just through my phone, and ask them to, hey, just send me a quick voice note back and ask them a question about them, like a personal question, not deeply personal, but something that gets to know them. The people who do not respond with a voice note and who will either pick up the phone or send me an email or send me a text back, there's a lot that I can tell about that already.
Mm. Tell us a little bit about your insights on that. I have
So
one insight on that, which is
okay.
they don't follow directions.
Well, that is definitely a big one, right? And especially because sometimes you may get a direction that pushes you out of your comfort zone.
Right.
Right? There's sometimes we have to do things that it might cause pause. And it's the person that is number one, ready and able to, yes, listen to directions, but also two, likely move a little bit out of their comfort zone with somebody initially to answer something that isn't work related, right? It builds that character. And in those moments, my motto has always been in life to grow, do the thing that scares you most. If I'm worried to
Yes,
do that, I need to jump in and do it. It's for my own soul growth.
exactly.
And
Well, and that big, hairy, audacious goal that you set for yourself, all of the getting there tends to be behind a door marked fear.
yeah,
And
right,
so if you keep avoiding that door marked fear, it's going to be a long time if you ever reach that big, hairy, audacious goal.
right. And sales is a big, hairy, audacious goal for people,
Oh,
right? When
heck
you get
yeah.
into sales as a job, it will pull out all of the professional and personal development required in you the moment you say yes to a sales job.
Yes, it is the world's number one. If you want to accelerate your professional growth, go into sales.
Yeah, right.
Absolutely.
So I don't need all, amazing selling, top producing, ego driven, all the stuff on a resume. I want people that are willing to grow on a soul level.
Yeah,
And that requires listening to directions and going out of your comfort zone.
absolutely. I like that. That's really good. And it's really salient to the work that you're doing. It's not like some kind of a random test to make sure that they can follow directions. It's deeper than just that.
Mhm. Right.
I like that. So, as a business owner, as a founder, right, there are kind of two general schools of business founding. There are the deeply technical, I've done all the things, I've sat in all the seats kind of people. And then there are the people who are like, well, I'm just going to hire a bunch of who's to take care of the house. But I don't need to know how the sausage is made. What is your take on that?
I have sat in all the seats for better or for worse.
And why do you feel it's important to have that level of understanding as a founder?
Well, I learned very early on when I started hiring people to do some of the things that I didn't have a knowledge base on, that if I didn't learn the details of what they were doing, then it would cause me some serious limitations. And honestly, they had this point in time where I had hired somebody very early on in the beginning that was just constantly telling me the thing that I wanted to do could not be done. This is not the way that software
Mm,
works. This is not the way. And it was just this consistent resistance to what I was asking to be done. And I mean, there's two schools of thought to this, that legitimately something can't be done, and maybe that's not the right form for us. There's an adjustment, a requirement to move in a different direction. Or we just aren't willing to look at how to do something
yeah,
differently because it requires
exactly.
more effort,
And
right?
and how do you tell the difference?
Well, it's when you it doesn't make any sense, right? So when there's no reason why this can't be done, it may not exist yet, but this would be a really good thing to do. So how do we figure it out? And it's when you ask the question of how do we figure it out, and it's I've been doing this for X number of years and this is not how it's done in the industry, that I immediately knew
Mm,
this was not the right fit.
yeah, this is not the right person. Thank you. We will free you to pursue opportunities that suit you better.
Yeah, and this would be a really good example of what we were just talking about earlier, and having that mutual parting of ways when realizing we were frustrating each other because I wanted something she wasn't willing to learn, and she wanted something that I wasn't willing to do, which was status quo.
Yeah, absolutely. Ah, so why did you make the choice to be completely virtual, so to speak?
Mhm. I think it gives
Because
us
I mean it's really what do I want to say? It's a trope in real
mm.
estate that there is an office.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think part of me really is just on this earth to push the boundaries. This is one way that I can do it in a whole other way. And I really think it gives us that infinite possibilities. It creates instead of boundaries, limitless, really. And what I mean by that is real estate is very boundaries driven, right?
Oh yeah,
We
location, location, location. Yeah.
Exactly. And so when you're thinking about infinite growth as well, then having a specific spot in which you can only do business in is kind of handcuffing in my brain, right? As a
Yeah.
founder, as somebody that's a visionary. And so I wanted to have the ability to serve people that are not locked into our boundaries. And
Mm.
by that, I mean, real estate agents, brokers, we generally will belong to a real estate board, real estate brokerage within our region,
Yep.
and we choose based on who is available in proximity geographically.
Right.
Now, what if you don't align to the vision and the values of a company that's geographic to you?
Yeah, exactly. And that can be a real quandary. The other thing that I've noticed, and God, I was listening to a diary of the CEO the other day, and I forget who the guest was that's on there, but he's a very successful serial entrepreneur.
Mhm,
And one of the things that he noticed, because he thinks about the bigger picture stuff, is that the trend is to be no longer geographically limited. And if you're geographically limited, you are not on trend right now. And
mm,
to the point that it's probably going to be a problem for world governments
right.
who really are on that whole geographic limitation thing. But I want to dig into this more, but we are already up on our second break. So we'll dig into that some more when we come back and how you can move into that unlimited kind of space around your business because there's really literally a paradigm shift happening. So spend some time over the break thinking about in what ways have you been limited by physical location and how could you start breaking some of those chains so that you can work with the trend of what's going on now instead of trying to fight against the tide that's going in the opposite direction. And if you've already had that thought, you can always go out to leadershippitfallquiz.com and find out your leadership style and the pitfall you may want to be addressing. And hang with us. We'll be right back from the break. Welcome back from the break. This is your host, Zofia Morales. I am still here with Kady Romagnuolo. And over the break, we did two things. The first thing is Kady finished the Leadership Pitfall quiz. And the second thing is I spent a little moment on Google going through past episodes of Diary of a CEO. And the gentleman whose name I couldn't remember is Daniel Priestley. And I've got to say, that's definitely an episode worth spending some time on if you've been thinking about like the direction of things and overall business trends and that sort of thing, because it's always better to swim with the tide than against the tide. So don't go there yet, though, because we have a lot more to discuss here. You can do that afterwards. So when I created this leadership pitfall quiz, I basically discovered there are kind of four foundational leadership types. And one of the things I've noticed as people have been taking it is I will get comments like, well, I got this, but I kind of feel like I was this other thing. And so I'm going to put out there all four types. And you can tell me if you ever resonated with one of the other ones before you resonated with the one that you got. How does that sound?
Very cool. Okay.
All right. So, my four types, the first one is the golden retriever. And I think this is a pretty common one for women. It tends to be the people pleaser sort of leader. If everybody is happy, they're going to be productive, and we're all going to go down the road together. But the challenge with the golden retriever, if you've spent any time people pleasing, you're probably already aware of some of the drawbacks there, which is there's not a lot left for you because you spent all that time feeding into other people's cups and making sure that they're happy and have everything they need, but you haven't been asking for what you need a lot of times. That's one of the big drawbacks of the golden retriever. Another drawback of the golden retriever is sometimes you lose track of what's really important goal wise for you because you're trying to please, for example, a boss or a client or someone like that. And they hijack your own personal vision, your own personal goal. So that's the golden retriever. And the second type is what I call the octopus. And this is the person that needs to have their fingers in everything. And some of it, I think, is a lack of trust. Sometimes it's just a level of what I want to say perfectionism that we're trying to hit, that we feel like we have to be involved in order for the quality to be what we need it to be. And so this tends to lead to things like micromanaging, which can sometimes lead to resentment in the team and a whole lot of burnout because, again, you're not just doing your job, you're trying to do your entire team's jobs in the end. And so that's the octopus. And then there is the lone wolf. And I have to say, I was very lone wolf for a long time. I'm like, don't give me a tame. I don't want to deal with anyone. Don't make me work with anybody. And that's one of the main characteristics of the lone wolf is like, yeah, no, just leave me in the corner, let me do my thing, and I don't want to try and persuade anybody to go where I'm going. I don't want to deal with pack dynamics. And the drawback with that is business is not a solo sport. It's a team sport. And if you're a lone wolf, you will not make it very far if you have lofty ambitions. You you may be fine as like a solopreneur, but there's definitely going to be a limit to the number of people you can impact
Mhm.
because of that particular disposition. And then the fourth type is what I call the renegade rhino. And this is someone who's got that vision very clear in their mind and they're very single-minded on that vision. And it's like, get on the bus or get off, but this bus is pulling out. And some of the drawbacks with the renegade rhino is a lot of times, if you're naturally a rhino, if this wasn't something you evolved into, there tends to be a lack of good communication around that beyond the you're on the bus or you're off the bus. And so oftentimes with renegade rhinos who didn't start as another type, one of the things we need to work with is that communication where you get buy-in so that people are like, yeah, okay, I think I want to be on that bus.
Right.
So those are the four types. And so which one kind of do you remember earlier in your life maybe resonating with you, or have you always been a rhino?
Oh, goodness. I was most definitely not born a rhino. And I appreciate the evolution through the different stages. And I'm so grateful now looking back that I did have my retriever years for a very long time. And I sat in that seat and grew as a person until it was very constricting.
Yeah.
And I love these analogies because I can clearly see the points in time, the stages in my personal life and in my career where I sat in all of those seats and what I gained from them and what was so incredibly challenging from each phase as well.
Yeah. What did you find was the most challenging from your golden retriever years? And then what did you evolve into after that?
Yeah, just really being able to say what I wanted I
Mm,
think I held myself back for so many years because I thought I needed to help other people do what they were doing. I was really good at being the support person instead of
mm.
driving the bus.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. So what did you evolve into after the retriever?
Definitely the person who did everything by herself, right?
Ah, we went lone wolf after that.
Yes. Absolutely, where it was like a rejection of, systems, and systems to me meant, like, people and process of how things are done. You pass off one duty to the next and, very conveyor belt mentality in my mind that I rejected and therefore had to do everything myself and, really resonate with the whole micromanaging, and luckily, I didn't necessarily have a team that I was micromanaging, but I didn't allow myself to get to that, to have that resentment because I couldn't even hire anybody. So what's the benefit of that?
Very good. And so, what shifted for you? What clicked you into Renegade Rhino gear?
Enough life experience and failures, which, I want to say in the quotation marks, in the sense of not getting what I wanted.
Right. Well, and I like to reframe failure as data
Yes. Right.
because the you only fail if you stop,
Yeah.
honestly.
Yeah.
That's the only way in which you fail. Yeah, maybe you
Yeah.
get data that wasn't what you were expecting,
Yeah.
but it's not failure.
Yeah. You know what immediately came into my mind when you said that is that I am data driven, meaning
Mm,
so many different interpretations of that. I've collected data through failure
yes, exactly.
and it drives me.
I forget who said it. There's an entrepreneur out there whose whole thing is fail fast.
Right?
And it's not so much about failure, but going out there and getting the reps in so that you're getting the data, you're getting the feedback that you need to be able to refine what you're doing because
hmm
you cannot steer a parked car.
Yeah. You got to keep moving. I've got a
Yeah,
quote on my wall right in front of me. It's a Albert Einstein that says life is like riding a bicycle. In order to keep your balance, you must keep moving.
exactly. Oh, I love that. It gives me chills.
That's a good one.
So, talk to me a little bit about how it has been having an investor in your business. Some people have challenges with that. Some people find it suits them fairly well. What's that dynamic been like for you?
Well, I think I found a really good mix of some initial mentorship that actually came with the role. And then also, it was like a teetering off. So, within the first year to the first 2 years, there was a little bit more input and feedback in the sense of getting together and understanding the dynamics and the growth of what was going on. And then now, just being in a stage in which it's very independently driven, and there isn't a whole lot of connection to daily operations or anything like that. It's, very much so like, "Okay, I got you at first, and now I see you have yourself."
All right. That's like the sweet spot. That's the thing I think that most of us hope for when we go through that process.
Mhm.
What were some early signs that this was going to be a good matchup in that regard?
I
Because
think it
there
was
are
a
always early warning signs if it's going to be good or if it's going to be bad.
Yeah, I think it was building that trust to not be micromanaged, because I think there was the capacity for the possibility of having just too much information needed regularly, check-ins, and I'm happy to do required check-ins to some degree, but when it starts becoming, "How are you doing things?" That's where I get a little bit of, "We need a trust."
Yeah.
Right? There needs to be a trust leap. And I think standing up and learning for myself early on that being able to confidently deliver information at the point in which I did have communication really built that trust factor to say, okay,
Mm,
I can trust what you're communicating. And that's where, again, that coach hat really comes back in, and past experience as an NLP practitioner in connecting with the other person so they feel comfortable with this human being their investment.
right. Well, and I think sometimes that's a little bit of kind of a mysterious black box for women.
Mm.
We do
Mhm.
have some verbal habits that
Mhm.
don't inspire confidence.
Right.
What would be some of those verbal habits we might want to look out for?
Ooh, it's the ums and the talking over, and when it's time to say something, we say way too much instead of getting to the point and just
Mm,
allowing for space.
yes. One of the habits I've been trying to break is using a lot of modifiers.
Yes.
I just want to. You don't need the just. I
Right.
want to blah. Or
Right.
better yet, I am blah.
Mhm.
This is the goal.
Yeah.
And if you record yourself on a regular basis, which I do because I podcast,
Right.
it becomes very clear where you're using a lot of modifiers, where you're not using a lot of modifiers.
Right.
So I guess There we go. Another one of those. We'll just cross that right out. I suggest everyone who's looking to communicate in a more effective way, record your interactions on a regular basis and compare those to the communication styles of other people who project confidence, who you trust, and get some permission. Maybe you can record them also so you can compare one to the other. And that'll give you some really good insight into, oh, wow, I did not realize I had that verbal tick. Because you can't change what you don't know is there. So we're down to the last couple minutes here. Actually, the last minute of the show. What would be your words of wisdom to someone who's going down this founder path, who's decided, you know what, I do need to rope some money in. I do need it to be more than me, myself, and I to make this grander vision happen?
Make it super simple. 3 steps. First, simplify. One sentence. What do you want? What's your big vision? No matter how grand you think it is, figure out how to deliver it in one sentence. Second,
Mm.
say that sentence to people you don't know for feedback. See what
Yes.
they think it means. What does this mean to you when I say this? And accept the feedback as either something that you can change or fuel your initial statement.
Oh,
And then
nice.
third, you gotta start asking people for what you want and keep asking until somebody has it.
I love the third one, especially. I mean, the first two, killer, absolutely do that. But the third one, so often as women, we will hold back and
Mhm.
feel like we don't want to impose, blah, 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 blah. Somebody should just realize I'm a wallflower and invite me to the
Yeah.
dance. But that's not how life works. And the truth of the matter is, every time you don't ask, you're telling your own self no.
Mhm.
So ask.
Yeah.
Asking costs nothing. And if they say no, they say no. And no isn't always no. Find out why.
Exactly. It could also give you everything.
Absolutely. And that's what's on the line, everything that you want. It's been such a pleasure having you here with me today, Kady. I really appreciate you joining us.
Thank you. What a beautiful conversation.
Ah, I've enjoyed it so much. And I really enjoy all of you who join us for these conversations. It really fuels my mission to be able to bring some vision and some motivation to women everywhere who are looking to do that bigger, better thing for themselves, for their family, for their kids. And I just can't tell you how much I appreciate you taking time out of your busy life to come in and join us for this. And so every week I try to put together something better. And next week, what we will be discussing is if you feel like you need to check your feminine side at the door when you go into work, you might want to join us for next week's conversation where we discuss redefining women's role in the digital marketplace with Whitney Walker. So until next week, go out there, be bold, be beautiful, and be yourself.